It was supposed to be a typical evening, just me and my closest friends, kicking back in the living room. The whiskey flowed, laughter echoed around us, and we were reminiscing about our recent mountain getaway, flipping through the photos on the screen. The trip had been perfect, days spent hiking, nights around the campfire, memories we thought would stay warm and carefree. But then Mark leaned in closer, his expression shifting from amused to dead serious. "Wait, hold on. Do you guys see that?" We all squinted at the screen, confused. It was a photo of us, standing at the trailhead, smiles plastered on our faces. But just behind us, barely visible, was a man's face. He stood a few feet back, blending into the background, his expression cold, almost emotionless. None of us had noticed him during the trip. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just a random stranger. The mood in the room shifted, and what had been an ordinary night quickly spiraled into something far more chilling. "Probably just some random guy," I shrugged, trying to brush it off. But then Mark clicked to the next photo, and there he was again. This time, he was closer, still in the background, still staring. My stomach churned. "Who is that?" I muttered under my breath. We started going through the pictures faster, and that's when things got even stranger. The man appeared more frequently. At first, he was far off, a blur in the distance, but with each new picture, he inched closer. His face was clearer, more unsettling. He never spoke to us, never interacted, but he was always there, lurking, watching. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I was anything but calm. My thoughts were racing. Had we been followed the entire trip by this guy? "I don't know, man. This is freakin' weird," Mark said, scratching his head, just as confused as I was. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a coincidence. Something wasn't right, and it gnawed at me. A wild thought crossed my mind, one I immediately dismissed, but it kept coming back, creeping in with every passing second. I glanced over at my wife, Jenny, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, barely paying attention to the conversation. She was scrolling through her phone, seemingly unfazed by the tension building in the room. "You see this?" I asked, showing her the pictures. She glanced up briefly, offering a half-smile. "Yeah, weird, huh? Probably just some random dude." But something about the way she said it felt off. Her tone was too casual, too dismissive. I knew Jenny well enough to recognize when she was pretending everything was fine, and this was definitely one of those times. My heart started racing, paranoia creeping in. Could she possibly know something about this strange man? I kept my suspicions to myself for the moment, but my mind was already spiraling. Later that night, after everyone had left and Jenny had gone to bed, I stayed up, staring at the pictures on my phone. There was something haunting about that man's face, the way he seemed to get closer in each shot, like he was following us and we hadn't even noticed. A week slipped by, and the thought of that man still ate away at me. I became more restless, my suspicions spiraling out of control. I had to find out the truth. So, I did something I never thought I would, I started snooping around. I kept it from Claire, of course. I didn't want her thinking I'd lost my mind. But every chance I got, I went through her stuff, checking her emails, scrolling through her social media. I needed to know if she had any connection to him. And then, one night, I found it. Late that evening, I logged into her email, and there it was, a string of messages from someone named Josh. The subject line alone made my blood turn cold. "Miss you, babe." My heart pounded as I clicked it open, my hands trembling. The messages were flirtatious, filled with suggestive comments, but the part that hit hardest was the picture she'd sent him. It was one of the photos from our trip, the same trip where that man had been lurking in the background. That's when it all hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't some random stranger. This was her lover. He had been following us the entire time, watching, and I had been completely clueless. The rage that surged through me was immediate, but so was the sharp, cold sting of betrayal. I just sat there, staring at the screen, everything I thought I knew about our marriage unraveling before my eyes. Claire, the woman I had trusted with my life, had been hiding this from me, sneaking around with this guy and letting him tail us like some twisted stalker. The emails revealed more than I ever wanted to see. Not only was she cheating, but this man was some kind of pervert who got off on watching her with me, lingering in the background of our lives like a shadow. I slammed the laptop shut and just stared blankly at the wall. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? And most importantly, what was I going to do now? The answer didn't come right away, but when it did, it was crystal clear. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Claire had betrayed me, humiliated me, and now it was my turn. I was going to make her pay. I spent the next few days plotting, keeping my anger under control, hidden beneath a mask of normalcy. I played the part of the loving husband, all the while setting the stage for my revenge. Claire would never see it coming, and that's what made it so sweet. I was going to destroy her, just like she had destroyed me. And when it was over, we'd be nothing but distant memories to each other. But not before I made sure she felt every ounce of pain she'd caused me. A grin crept across my face as I imagined the look on hers when everything came crashing down. This was only the beginning. The pieces were falling into place. It was just a matter of time. The days that followed were unbearable. Knowing the truth about Claire and her lover consumed me. Every time she smiled, every time she kissed me goodnight, the bile rose in my throat. But I had to pretend everything was fine, even though the fury inside me grew with each passing moment. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the silence between us was thick, almost suffocating. I could feel the tension rising, but she seemed oblivious, or maybe she didn't care anymore. I watched her closely, trying to catch any hint of guilt, any sign of regret in her eyes. But she seemed calm, collected, like she wasn't living a lie. I decided to push a little, test the waters. So, I was thinking, I started, keeping my tone light and casual, maybe we should head back to the mountains. Just the two of us, you know, another getaway. Jenny looked up from her plate, a bit surprised. The mountains? Again? We were just there a few weeks ago. Yeah, I know, I replied, forcing a smile. But I had such a great time. I thought we could use another trip, just to relax together. She hesitated, her fork hovering in midair. I don't know, maybe. Work's been pretty busy lately. Busy? I said, pretending to be confused. I thought things were slowing down at the office. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. Well, there's always something going on. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. The lies slipped off her tongue so easily, like she'd done this 100 times before. But I wasn't about to let her keep playing me for a fool. I leaned back in my chair, studying her carefully, my mind racing with ideas. What about that guy from the trip? I asked suddenly, keeping my tone casual but watching for her reaction. The one who kept popping up in our pictures. Remember him? Her body tensed, just a little, but I caught it. Her grip on the fork tightened for a split second. There it was, the first crack in her facade. She quickly pulled herself together, though, letting out a forced laugh. Oh, yeah, she said, trying to sound nonchalant. That was strange, wasn't it? Probably just a tourist who happened to be at the same spots we were. Yeah, maybe, I nodded slowly, pretending to go along with it. But inside, I knew better. She knew exactly who he was. I needed more proof. Something undeniable before I made my move. The next morning, I left for work as usual, giving Jenny a quick kiss on the cheek before walking out the door. But I didn't go to the office. Instead, I parked just around the corner, waiting. My heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. If she was meeting him, today would be the day. She had no clue I was onto her. An hour passed, then another. Just as doubt began to creep in, she stepped out of the house. She was dressed casually, but something about her pace was off, too hurried, too deliberate. My gut twisted. I started the car and followed her, keeping a good distance to avoid being spotted. Jenny drove across town, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop. The kind of place where nobody would give you a second look. I parked a few spots away and watched as she went inside. A few minutes later, a man appeared. He was tall, dark-haired, and wearing the same smug look that had haunted me since I saw him in those photos. It was him. The man from the pictures. The one who had been following us. They didn't even try to hide it. He kissed her as soon as they met, right there in plain sight. She smiled up at him like a teenager in love, completely oblivious to the fact that I was watching everything unfold. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every muscle in my body screamed to get out of the car, march inside, and tear them both apart. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to stay smart, stay patient. This wasn't the time for a confrontation. I needed to break her in a way she'd never recover from. As they sat by the window, their heads close together, talking and laughing, it was clear. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. The way she gazed at him, the way they shared those quiet moments, told me everything. She was head over heels for this guy. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. After about an hour, they left the coffee shop and strolled over to his car, which was parked just across the street. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them kiss again before she slipped into the passenger seat. Where the hell were they going now? I followed at a safe distance, keeping out of sight, until they pulled into a hotel parking lot on the outskirts of town. My vision blurred with rage as they walked inside, arm in arm. This was it, the undeniable proof I had dreaded. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was parading this guy around like it was nothing. She even had the nerve to drag him along on our trips, right under my nose. I waited in my car, each minute feeling like an eternity, my mind racing with thoughts of vengeance. I wanted to hurt her, to make her feel the agony she had inflicted on me. But I knew I had to be smart. I couldn't let my anger take over just yet. After what felt like hours, Claire finally stepped out of the hotel, alone this time. She looked satisfied, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly out of place. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. But I didn't confront her, not then. That would have been too easy. No, I was going to make her suffer, piece by piece. When she came home later that evening, I was already there, sitting on the couch with a drink in hand, acting like nothing had happened. "How was your day?" I asked, my voice calm, almost casual. "Busy," she replied, flashing me that tired smile of hers. "Work's been crazy, you know." I smiled back, but inside, my blood was boiling. She had no clue what was coming. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay there wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with plans. This was only the beginning. I was going to ruin her life, and when I was done, she'd have nothing left. Tomorrow, I'd start the next phase. She thought she had gotten away with it, but she was dead wrong. The next morning, I woke up with one thing on my mind: revenge. I couldn't stand the idea of letting her continue with this charade, smiling at me, pretending like we were still the perfect couple. But it wasn't time to confront her yet. I needed to make sure my payback was slow, methodical, and absolute. As I stood in front of the mirror, shaving, I could see her behind me, still in bed, casually scrolling through her phone. Just seeing her there, so comfortable in her lies, made my blood boil all over again. But I kept my face neutral, my mind quietly working through every detail of what was to come. Heading to the office today, she asked, not even bothering to look up from her screen. Yeah, I replied, keeping my tone steady. Busy day ahead. Don't overwork yourself, she said with that same sweet smile, the one I knew she had probably flashed at him after their little rendezvous. I could barely stand to look at her, but I had to play my part for a little longer. When I left the house that morning, I had no intention of going to the office. Instead of heading to the office, I drove across town to meet with a lawyer. My plan was simple but brutal. I wasn't just going to take her money, I was going to destroy her, leave her with nothing, and expose her affair in a way she'd never recover from. But I knew I had to be calculated. This wasn't just about financial ruin, it was about emotional devastation. Inside the lawyer's office, I sat across from a sharp-looking woman who wasted no time. So, Mr. Hayes, she began, what exactly are we dealing with here? Infidelity? I nodded, my jaw clenched. Yes. I have proof, photos, emails, everything. She raised an eyebrow and started jotting down notes. I assume you want a divorce, but it sounds like you want more than that. You want her to pay. I want her to suffer for what she's done, I said, my voice cold. This can't be simple. The lawyer leaned forward, her pen poised. Do you two have joint accounts? Shared assets, properties? Yes, I replied. We share a bank account, and we both invested in some properties together. The house is in both our names. Good, she said, her eyes gleaming. What you're looking for is a scorched earth approach. We'll make sure that by the time we're finished, she'll be left with nothing but regret. A dark sense of satisfaction stirred inside me as she laid out the plan. We'd freeze our joint accounts, drag her affair into public view during the divorce, and utterly destroy Amanda's reputation. By the end, she'd lose everything, her home, her money, her image. After finalizing the details, I left the office feeling oddly calm. It was like a weight had been lifted from me, even though I knew the real storm was still on the horizon. For now, I had to keep playing the devoted husband until the time was right. That evening, when I walked through the door, Amanda greeted me with her usual smile. She was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, and the smell of garlic and onions filled the air. But all I could think about was what she'd been doing in that hotel room earlier. Hey, babe, she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. I made your favorite tonight, lasagna. I forced a smile. Thanks. It smells great. We sat down to eat, and I watched her carefully, noticing every small detail, how she glanced at her phone every few minutes, how she avoided making eye contact for too long. Maybe guilt, or maybe fear, was starting to creep in. She still thought she had me fooled, though. Arrogance kept her from seeing what was coming. So, how was your day? She asked, cutting into her lasagna. Productive, I said, taking a sip of water. Had a lot to wrap up at the office. Everything goes smoothly? I nodded, fighting to hide the satisfaction bubbling up inside. Yeah. How about you? Busy day at work? She paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. Yeah, it was a long day. You know how it is. It took every ounce of self-control not to throw my plate across the room and confront her right then and there. But I held back, biding my time. When I hit her, it would be when she least expected it. The next day, I upped the ante. I hired a private investigator to tail Amanda and dig up even more dirt on her affair. Even though I already had enough to expose her, I wanted to see just how deep this whole mess went. Maybe this wasn't her first affair. Maybe there was more dirt to uncover. So, I kept digging. While waiting for more from the private investigator, I started making small changes, subtle shifts that I knew would throw her off balance. My touches grew cold and detached, just going through the motions. I'd disappear from the house for hours without a word, take calls in private, and avoid eye contact whenever I could. Amanda, of course, noticed. One evening, she finally asked about it. Is everything okay? She asked, concern thick in her voice. You've been distant lately. I leaned back, keeping my face neutral. Distant? I've just been busy. Work's been intense. She frowned, clearly sensing that something else was going on. It's not just work. I feel like you're pulling away from me. Did I do something wrong? The irony hit me hard. Did she do something wrong? I wanted to shout, to tell her how she betrayed me. But I didn't. Instead, I kept my cool. No, I replied evenly. You haven't done anything wrong. Maybe I'm just stressed. Her frown deepened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, fear that maybe I knew more than I was letting on. That night, while she slept, I checked my phone for updates from the private investigator. He'd followed her again, snapping photos as she met up with her lover. This time, they didn't bother with a coffee shop, they went straight to the hotel. The rage inside me simmered constantly now, but I held it in check. Every new betrayal was just another brick in the wall of my revenge. The days dragged on, and Amanda grew more uneasy. She'd watch me closely, waiting for me to accuse her of something, to call her out. But I stayed silent, knowing that the final blow would land even harder when she thought she had gotten away with it. Then the weekend came, and with it, the perfect opportunity. We had been invited to a party at one of Amanda's friends' houses. It was lively, full of laughter, drinks, and chatter. Amanda seemed to relax, enjoying herself, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. At one point, I excused myself, pretending to head to the bathroom, but instead, I slipped into a quiet room upstairs. Pulling out my phone, I logged into our joint bank account and initiated a freeze on the funds. With one swift move, I cut off her access to the money. I could only imagine the panic she'd feel when she discovered it. But I wasn't done yet. I returned to the party, where Amanda was happily chatting with her friends, still oblivious. I walked up to her with a smile, slipping my arm around her waist. Having fun? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She smiled back, but there was something off in her eyes. Yeah, it's nice to get out. Little did she know, this was the beginning of the end for her. I was just getting started, and the next few days would be the worst she'd ever lived through. Tomorrow, everything would crumble. That next morning, the weight of the last few weeks finally hit me hard. Amanda's lies, her betrayal, the affair, it all fueled the fire in me. I was ready to end this once and for all, to tear her life apart like she had torn mine. But confronting her wasn't enough. I was going to destroy everything she thought she had, leaving her no path to recovery. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. The night before, I had prepped everything, a package stuffed with printed emails, damning photos, and a flash drive with video evidence from the investigator. Everything was in place. All I had to do now was pull the trigger. Amanda sat at the kitchen table, casually sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. Just seeing her so calm, so oblivious to what I knew, made my blood boil. But today wasn't going to be another day of silence. I walked over, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. She glanced up, immediately sensing something was off. "What's up?" she asked, her voice trying to stay composed. I slid the package across the table toward her. "Open it." She frowned in confusion, setting her coffee down. "What is this?" "Open it," I repeated, my tone low and sharp. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled back the envelope, slowly revealing the contents. The color drained from her face when she saw the photos, her and her lover, caught red-handed. Her wide, panicked eyes flicked up to meet mine. What is this?" she stammered. "You know exactly what it is, Amanda," I said, my voice icy. "It's the truth. All your lies, all your betrayal, right there for you to see." She dropped the photos, her face pale, panic creeping into her voice. "I can explain. No, I snapped, leaning forward, my anger finally boiling over. There's nothing to explain. I know everything, the emails, the hotel meetings, the man in those pictures, your lover. I spat the word with venom. Amanda's expression shifted to one of desperation. Her mouth opened and closed, as if she were struggling to find words. I didn't mean for this to happen, it's not what you think. Not what I think. I let out a bitter laugh. Don't insult me. You brought him on our trip. You flaunted him right in front of me, thinking I'd never figure it out. Pathetic. She reached out for my hand, tears forming in her eyes. Please, just let me explain. We can fix this. I'll end it, I swear. Fix this. I repeated, pulling my hand away from hers. There's nothing to fix, Amanda. You destroyed everything. There's no going back. That was when her tears finally broke through, her composure shattering. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. But her tears meant nothing to me now. I had waited for this moment too long, and I wasn't going to let her off easy. You ruined this marriage the moment you brought him into our lives, I said coldly, standing up from the table. But do you know what's worse than the affair, Amanda? It's the fact that you thought you could keep playing me for a fool. That I'd never catch on, I said, the anger simmering beneath the surface. But I did. And now, you're going to pay. What do you mean? She asked through her tears, lifting her head to meet my gaze. I smiled, cold, calculated. Check your bank account. Amanda blinked, confused. What? Go on. Check it. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone, pulling up the banking app. The moment her eyes landed on the balance, horror washed over her face. Where is all our money? My money, Amanda. Not yours anymore. I froze the accounts. Everything you thought you had, gone. You'll be lucky if you can afford a cab ride out of here. Her face twisted in panic. You can't do this to me. That money is mine too. No, it's not, I replied, my voice calm, almost eerily so. It was ours. But you forfeited any right to it the moment you decided to cheat. Her breathing grew ragged, as she scrambled to find some sense of control. You can't just leave me with nothing. I leaned in, my voice dark with venom. Watch me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence thick and suffocating. Slowly, the full weight of what I'd done began to sink in, and I saw desperation flicker in her eyes. Please, she whispered, barely audible. Please don't do this. I'll do anything to make it right. I'll leave him. We can go to counseling, we can. I slammed my fist on the table, causing her to flinch. It's too late for that, Amanda. You should have thought about all this before you slept with him. You made your choice. Her sobs grew louder, her whole body shaking as she fell apart in front of me. But I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. She had dug her own grave. You think I'm done? I asked, my voice steady and unrelenting. No. This isn't just about money. I've got everything, emails, photos, hotel visits. And I'm going to send it to everyone you know, your friends, your family, your colleagues. I'll make sure everyone sees the real you. Her eyes widened in terror. No, you can't. Please. Don't do that. I'll lose everything. That's the idea, I said, standing up and heading for the door. You took everything from me, Amanda. Now it's your turn. She lunged for me, grabbing my arm. Please. Don't do this. I'm begging you. I looked down at her, this once proud woman now reduced to a sniveling mess at my feet. I pulled my arm free, my expression cold and unfeeling. It's over, I said quietly. We're done. I walked out of the house, leaving her cries echoing in my ears as I slammed the door behind me. Outside, the weight lifted from my shoulders. The vengeance I had sought was complete. As I drove away, I could almost see Amanda's life crumbling in my rearview mirror. Everything she had built, every lie she had told, was about to come crashing down. And I didn't feel an ounce of regret. By the end of the day, I filed for divorce, sending the damning evidence to her friends and colleagues, ensuring her social and professional ruin. I even sent the pictures to her lover's wife, making sure he wouldn't get away unscathed either. By nightfall, Amanda would have nothing left, no home, no reputation, no lover, and certainly no husband. We would never see each other again. And that's how it ended. Not with forgiveness or reconciliation, but with the total and utter destruction of everything Amanda had tried to hide. I walked away from the wreckage of our marriage, free and unburdened, knowing that I had done what needed to be done. She had betrayed me. And I had made her pay. Forever.